Okie dokie. I think I'm live. So tell me if maybe I have to hold my mic closer or something because it's over to the side because obviously I'm in a new setup. First things first, let's pin. Nope, I can't pin my comment yet because I haven't even put out the invite. Okay, we're going to watch some clips. This is inspired by let's say T-Grog, let's say Anselman, let's say Phlebas. It's mainly inspired by Phlebas in this comment that he left this morning. What comment was that in? Or what video was that in, Phlebas? Oh, darn it. I haven't pulled that up yet. I thought I had pulled up all the pertinent things. Blast! Okay, I gotta do more work. Sorry, people. But essentially what this is going to be about, this is another PVK thing. So I made a comment on PVK's video, stories convey info that can't be conveyed by other means. So that's the title of the PVK. And I'm going to weave together a lot of things. This video is essentially on personal knowing and true epistemology, I would say, which is not really epistemology. True epistemology is ontology. Can we say that? And I guess this will get at Phlebas's criticism of me, which is he said that in one of my recent live streams, he said something like, holy cow, this computer struggles. Here we go. Here's the comment. We're ready to rock now. I'll start it. Let me share it. Present, share screen. Share. Okay. Look at it. It even got a heart from old PVK. So, and this is from the gospel seminar things with Jordan Peterson, and Jordan, and I've said this, Jordan conveyed and Jordan articulated in this video something that I thought was better than he ever has about postmodernism. And maybe this is true of postmodernism, but he said the postmodern critique is that we see through narrative. And I don't think that's true. I don't think we see through narrative. I think that we see through narrative. And that's egoic intellect stuff. That's the problem of conflating the map with the territory, or not realizing that all models are false and some are useful. And I would say, so I said this comment, is it coming through? Yes. So I said, we don't see through a narrative, but we think we do. This is why phenomenology and experience per se must always trump ideology. And then right after that, Peterson said something at 25, 26, there's nothing but the text. Which is essentially sola scriptura. So a little bit in this video, I'm going to put sola scriptura on blast. And it's a comment that I made to T-Grog about him and Anselman were going back and forth in the comments. And it's so funny to me. I mean, it really is funny to me that he and Anselman, they disagree about which ideology, but I think they're both ideological. Because I think that... Are you laughing? Are you laughing?
No.
Oh. My wife's also here, so she's watching me do this. I'm not paying
attention to you.
She's not paying attention to me. She loves listening to me talk about these things. It's what holds our marriage together. That's not true. So, because when you root your faith in ideas rather than in persons, even if you say it's a person, but it's the idea of a person, it's like this line. What that makes me think of is like there's a John Mayer line which says, what is that song where he's just like, where he says like, he's talking about love and he says, do you love me or the thought of me? what is that song? Anyhow, he's like, me, you're the thought of me, you're the thought of me. Now I'm laughing. No, she's laughing. But that's exactly right. And this is why when you're talking about anything, you're talking about everything. Because that song about John Mayer is he's talking about Ian McGilchrist. It could be the writer and the elephant, Jonathan Haidt. The brain, the master and the emissary. All models are false, some are useful. They're all talking about the same thing, which is this, which is reality is the transcendently immanent thing in which we live and move and have our being. And if you have eyes to see, is present in everything. That's the sacramental worldview. Versus the divided world, where it's just like, this is sacred, this isn't sacred, good and bad, and you're separating things. And it's kind of like the idea of like, all roads lead to heaven, all roads lead to God. No, but God will be found on any road for those with eyes to see. And this is like what Stephen D20 has been talking about in all his recent videos about physics and math, T-Grog. So go check those out, which I have them linked in there. But I like to call this the hard problem of all perception. Rooting one's reality in a text is ideology. And this is the inheritance of the West. It's scholasticism. It's sola scriptura. It's the studies. Just look at the studies. Just look at the math. Just look at the science. And just like, when people put the creed in their yard and like, we believe the science, guess what that is? Ideological. They're rooting reality in texts, in studies, double-blind, empirically tested, peer-reviewed studies. But the problem is, which ones? And how do you discern that? Welcome to the meaning crisis. Persons perceive and interpret and value text. The text in and of itself is meaningless. The text per se is meaningless. All right. Now the replies here. Let's give Phlebas his due in replies. And Phlebas, you can come in here and defend yourself. Stephen said, that's one of the things about T-Grog that's irresistible, the experience, the lack of going by the book. And Phlebas said, you equate the text of Scripture with any old book. Inspired Scripture, read through the eyes of faith and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, removes your epistemological language conundrum. It is the word, not any narrative. So I agree, it's not just any narrative. I agree with that. So like, inspired Scripture, read through the eyes of faith, okay, right there, you're smuggling personalist knowing. You're smuggling the kind of person who has the eyes to see and the ears to hear. There's no systematic way to get there, Phlebas, because you're saying, and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, and how do you discern who that is? And how do you pick and choose that? Via the text alone. You can't. You can't. That's why the person is the nexus and the locus of all meaning. And I say it is not the word. That's the logos. Is inspired, special, completely unique, amazing, profitable for all things, 1 Timothy 3:16. And I said, I want to live stream about this. And I am. And so now we can go to this Rainn Wilson, Alex O'Connor thing. And my boy Jeff gave me this timestamp, so that's good. And so Alex O'Connor, in that conversation with Rainn Wilson, which is excellent, by the way, and they talk about Rainn Wilson and the Baha'i faith and all that sort of stuff. But he said, a lot of these debates, and then I think this is Jeff's addendum, and I'd say many interpersonal arguments in general, or maybe that's inferred by the conversation, collapse because people listen to the question rather than to the questioner. The logos can transform and redeem anything, including death. I mean, that's the thing for Christians that just boggles my mind about either-oring about things, and the good and badding, and just like, this is inspired, this isn't inspired. And in one sense, you can say that, but also like the opposite is implied. And this is all of that Peter Rollins, Hegel, Christologic, identity of identity and non-identity, and Christ the eternal Tao. And why Antichrist even works is like, and this is a debate we were getting into with Alex, not the other Alex. Who's our Alex? What's your last name? Alex de Souza? Is that your last name? in my last live stream, we were talking about the text, is that there's multiple interpretations for the text. And he was saying, and we were talking about Christ's temptation in the wilderness and Christ using scripture to defend himself against the devil. But the devil also used scripture. So like, even the demons believe and shudder, right? This is the problem. Is like, do the demons and the devils believe the scriptures? Propositionally, yeah, they do. But they don't care. They use the scriptures in a mammon way. And I think many Christians use the scriptures in a mammon way. This is why I love Peter Rollins, is because Peter Rollins says psychoanalytically that this he talks about the lack being that which promises to make you whole and complete. So anything that promises to make you whole and complete, salvation, saying this prayer, becoming a Christian, going to church and doing the liturgy, taking the Eucharist, whatever promises to make you whole and complete is promising to fulfill the lack. And he says psychoanalytically, the Satan is what promises to fulfill the lack, because that's the deceiver. And so he said a lot of times modern religious institutions are the Satan, Christ and Antichrist. But thankfully, Christ and Antichrist are a hair's breadth. Okay, I'm in a bit of a manic state. All right, let's go to Alex O'Connor. Well, what? Well, no, okay, what's this comment? 22 replies. Here we got Anselman and T-Rogue. This is on the video. What is the spirit? I have it linked, I think, in the description. What is the spirit of new atheism? Says this to the churches, which, Paul, that doesn't even make sense. Your grammar's off. But Anselman, oh, I haven't shared it. Oops. I'm talking about things that you guys can't see. Here we go. Are we there? Are we working? Okay, let's go back. There are more serious attacks on the faith than made by T-Grog. There are those in the corner that are more subtle in their disdain for biblical Christianity. I'm not subtle in my disdain for biblicist Christianity. Any Christianity is going to be biblical. But this is like isms, absolutizing versus, or adverbial versus adjectival. I like the term, I would say biblical Christianity. I mean, it's redundant because all Christianity is biblical. Biblicist Christianity, meaning sola scriptura, meaning absolutizing the map without absolutizing Christ in me, the whole mystery of Christ, is, I'm not subtle about this. I would say that's idolatry. I mean, how's that for subtlety? I think it's idolatry. So, but like, here's the thing, is like, God saves idolaters. So we're all in luck. Such as those who allege the following kinds of things: that God is being, and for people who say that like I'm team winsome and team woo woo and like it doesn't matter, I just called biblicist Christianity idolatry. So like, that's not subtle. That's like very explicit and pointed and low agreeableness. I'm telling you what I think about that. But I think God saves sinners, people who miss the mark. So we're okay. I think it matters. Like when you mess up, it matters. But God is gracious and abounding in steadfast love. So we're okay. If we repent, if we forgive others who trespass against us. Oh, and I also want to talk about A Christmas Carol, because I went and watched that last night with my family, which is a good story, right? Ebenezer Scrooge. Okay. So there are those in the corner who are more subtle in their disdain for biblical Christianity, such as those who allege the following kinds of things: that God is being shaped into becoming something other than he has been by the influence of human beings. I mean, again, you're like quantum God, quantum Jesus, that he is being and becoming. This is the debate between process theology and divine simplicity. God is changeless, but he's also outside the categories of change and changeless. I mean, I think this is the implications of the doctrines of the incarnation. See, if you want more academic treatments of that, see Jordan Daniel Wood, Father John Bear, Greg of Nyssa, Origen, all people who are smarter than me and wiser, probably, and that God is being shaped into becoming something other than he has been. I wouldn't say it that way. I wouldn't say that he's becoming something other than what he has been, because again, that's an either or thing. That can by the influence of human beings, that God does things by which human beings can require him to ask forgiveness of them for, that God has no right to exclude anyone from his gift of eternal life in heaven, and must be held responsible for the wicked self-chosen alienation of God. Such ideas are proposed in the corner by those espousing or influenced by pantheism and occultism, the promotion of occult myths or Kabbalah, or the bungling creator God who must be repaired by human action, etc. This is an ongoing feature in TLC and is more in need of being corrected than the erroneous thinking of T-Grog. Did God need to become a man? Did Jesus fix things? The human being Jesus? Yes and no. I mean, come on. There's lots of replies. Woohoo. Nobody's saying that anyone's mother is a whore. Jeez. There's a lot of comments in here, but the comment I wanted to get at, you can read through them all, is, and again, we wage war not against persons, but against powers and principalities. In me explicitly naming anyone, I'm not condemning them. And I'm not saying that they are bad or irredeemable or anything, but I am talking about ideas, and I am talking about patterns of behavior and spirits. And so, like, the spirit that is, I can criticize a spirit that I think is animating someone without condemning them. And people can do that of me. And that's what allows us to have opponent processing and iron sharpening iron. If you don't do that, you can't do that. Okay, here's the text that I made. Yeah. So I said, you two are spiritually similar, T-Grog and Anselman, because I think they are. I think they're doing the same game. I think they are participating in the same spirit, which is objectivist rationalism, textual-based epistemology. And I think they're ignoring the hard problem of all perception, which is what Stephen D20 is talking about on his channel, starting with physics. That what you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing. It also depends upon the kind of person you are. And that the infinite possibilities that you perceive, when you perceive them, the possibilities collapse into one. The wave function, Schrodinger stuff. Go listen to Stephen D20 talk about this stuff, because he talks about it better than me. Okay, let's go on to the other one. Let's go to the Rainn Wilson conversation. And let's make this all big, and let's listen. Is this working? Okay, let's listen to this. And then I'll open it up, and then I'll leave because I got to go for a run and get on with my life.
But sometimes when you pay attention, you realize that they're actually asking something subtly different, or they're actually getting at something else. You know, a lot of these debates collapse because people listen to the question rather than the questioner. There's a, like, what is someone actually getting at? When someone gets up and they say, you know,
Okay, that's what Jeff pointed out to me. They're listening to the question rather than the questioner. And this is like, I've brought this up before, but this is a conversation like I've had with my wife, beautiful, wonderful woman. But like when we've gotten into debates about things, and she'll be like, this is what you said. You said these things. And I'm like, you can't use my words against me. I am like the arbiter and the sayer of my words. I am more fundamental than my words in and of themselves. When you use someone's words against them, you are being a textualist, in the same way that like a sola scriptura person is being a biblicist. You are holding the words per se in and of themselves to a higher value than the person. And then you've become an impersonalist, and you're not doing personal knowing, and you are not knowing as you know, as you are known, which is what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 8. So I will use the Bible to trample down biblicism, which is what everyone does when they insist on their when they value certain texts and as the interpretive metric over other texts. And guess what? You have to do that. You have to do that. Okay, let's go listen to what else they say. I'll rewind it some. This computer.
I just think that because a lot of these debates collapse because people listen to the question rather than the questioner. There's a what is someone actually getting at? When someone gets up and they say, I just think that because if there's no God, then I don't understand how you where this sort of stuff exists, and it's a bit sort of fumbling. And you can either, as a debater, go like, well, that's a nonsensical question. You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Or you can try and understand what they're really actually getting at. An example that I've talked about in a different context is this Ben Shapiro clip where it went super viral. Somebody came up to the microphone and was asking about like the Boy Scouts and why like girls can't be in the Boy Scouts or something, right? And why it can't just be like, they're just gender neutral. And I think she asks the question.
They Scouts.
Yeah, sure. Why not? She asks this question like, well, like Ben says only boys can be in the Boy Scouts. And she says, well, where is that written? And Ben goes, in the name Boy Scouts. And everyone laughs and applauds, right? And it's this really funny, great moment. But in a sense, it's kind of really stupid because you know what she's actually asking. Yeah. She's not literally asking, where is it written in the rules of the Boy Scouts that only boys get? She means like, why is that the case? She means, where is it written in the law?
What a great example. I like Alex O'Connor. And even in this video, I should go find it. There's some comment that someone said, I think it was the first comment. Oh, come on. Where are the comments? Redonkulous. What is happening? Is it because the live thing is up? Please give me the comments. There was someone who was criticizing Alex O'Connor because they were saying, I don't like this new whatever. I'm not going to be able to find it. But they were saying essentially like, I don't like this new Alex O'Connor where he's essentially not doing the gotcha stuff, where he's not like pointing out where people are wrong about things. He's not doing the thing Anselman and Tegrog love to do. And this is the perennial debate, the evergreen debate in TLC between those who want lower politeness, disagreeableness, and pointing out where people are wrong. Like, don't let people get away with saying wrong things. Like, point it out. Like, let's focus on it. Or do you focus on the thing behind the thing, which is what the person means? Because I would argue, if you want to keep focusing on the disagreement, you're inherently Protestant, protesting, and I'm kind of doing that, I guess, in this video, ironically, focusing on the disagreement. I'm very Protestant in that. I was just talking to my wife about this morning. I'm just like, what's the point of focusing on the thing that you all agree about and doing like the groupthink and hurrah like thing? Let's focus on the thing that's wrong, where we disagree. Let's lean into the opponent processing so that we can improve and get better. I mean, that's a lot of what I do in this corner. But like, it's very, this illustration of Ben Shapiro is so good because it's just like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. Like, what does the person mean? What are they trying to get at? It takes a little bit of emotional intelligence, EQ. It takes a little bit of empathy. It takes a little bit of active listening. It takes a little bit of dialogos and reciprocity where you are really attending to the other person and just being like, what do you want here? What are you trying to get at? Versus playing the rational gotcha game. Okay, let's go back to Alex O'Connor, and then I'll open this up, and you can come in and affirm me and validate me or disagree with me. I welcome both.
Rules, and Ben goes, in the name Boy Scouts, and everyone laughs and applauds, right? And it's this really funny, great moment. But in a sense, it's kind of really stupid because you know what she's actually asking. Yeah. She's not literally asking, where is it written in the rules of the Boy Scouts that only boys get? She means like, why is that the case? She means, where is it written in the law of the universe? And it just came out wrong. She said, well, where's that written? It's written in the name Boy Scouts.
Right.
It's very funny. But
well,
what
so much of what happens on YouTube is, whether it's political or religious, is kind of like you have, it's a lot of like the Charlie Kirk kind of thing of like, let me take this doofus liberal college student, with patchouli and Birkenstocks, and they're asking this question, and I've rehearsed my answer 1,000 times, and I'm gonna come on, I'm like a ton of bricks, and it's great media. It's a great show. It's like the Jake Paul boxing match, but it doesn't illuminate anything. It isn't a real conversation.
And we know that because people have historically been attracted to the sort of destroys things. Right? And it's hard to remember that there was a time where that was done, like, not ironically, where these titles like, X gets destroyed with facts and logics and all this kind of stuff. People do it as a joke now, but there was a time when that was sincere. And that was like a real sort of sentiment that people were trying to latch onto. You click on that video if you're being honest with yourself, because you want that rush, you want that boost, you want that point score, you want to, you're watching the Mike Tyson knockout clips because it's fun. You're not actually watching it because you're interested in figuring out who's the better fighter.
Can we have, for the title of this, can we be like, Baha'i destroys atheist?
Well, what I'll do is I'll put that, and then I'll put atheist destroys Baha'i, and then I'll split test them, and I'll see which gets more of a click. Oh,
goodness.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay. This is it's a really, really good conversation. Go and watch it. Khezi, you're messaging me? Khezi, I'm live streaming. All right? Get in here. Talk to me about this. Because T-Grog just said this. I want to talk about this. I'll say, well, here, I'll open it up and then I'll talk about this, because how long have I been doing this? 26 minutes. I'm going to do it for a little bit longer, and then I'm going to either shut it down or hand it off. Jess isn't here to... Jess, get in here. You're normally here to talk to me and take over. All right. Let's pin my thing. Pin it on my channel. And then let's go back and talk about T-Grog. I've been thinking more about this a lot, T-Grogan. Yahweh is not about having a dialogue. I think he is fundamentally about that. I think what God is doing in his human making is, I mean, think about this through the Old Testament. Jess is here. Lot and Abraham and
omnipresent
and Sodom and Gomorrah, right? He's just like, what if there's 77? What if there's 11? What if there's 1? What God fundamentally wants is people who wrestle with him. David, a man after God's own heart. Why? Because David told PVK, stop being a creep. What are you doing?
Dang, that was the PVK.
Somebody clip it. Clip it. Oh my Lord. Goodness gracious. Take it easy, Reverend. Pizza cutter. Yeah. If you're gonna murder me with a pizza cutter, please.
Seems like he's been stabbed 27 times with something round.
Yeah. So I'll just say that, I guess, and then leave it at that. I think fundamentally what God wants is for people who wrestle with him, who say what they think, who maybe disagree with him, because guess what? That's people who are simultaneously committed to him and the relationship and humble, but yet who say what they think and say if they disagree with him. I think that's what God wants. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Tell me
Alan.
what you think.
Hey. That's why T-Grog's around.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to compete with William Branch for the #1 commenter.
Also, I want to say, Anselman, please don't be hurt by this. I love you. Okay? I love you, but I can disagree with you and love you.
T-Grog reminds me of this guy in our Sunday morning men's Bible study. He's an older dude in his 70s. Fascinating character, because he basically believes in predestination in a very strict sense, and he believes in, well, some other things too, but every Bible study he brings up the Nazis He brings up people with birth defects and mental problems. He was like a special education teacher for a while. PBK is like just trying out all the stabby things.
It's also like that. Who was just talking about that recently? Who's the famous British atheist? Well, there's many, but Stephen Fry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like, if I see God someday, it's the problem of pain and suffering and like eye worms and little kids. And he's just like, if I see God, I'm just gonna be like, fuck you. You know what?
Yeah,
I think God wants us to be honest.
For sure. But what's funny about this guy in our Bible study is he is completely unhappy. Like he's a firm believer in, I'll just blanket statement, Calvinism in a very sort of very strict sense. And he is not happy about it. He is he's
maybe an honest Calvinist.
It's funny because I'm like, this doesn't have to be the case. He's like, I don't see any other way out of it. What about Judas? He brings up Judas all the time. He's like, Judas was predestined. It's all a show. He calls it a boat race. He's like, the whole thing's a boat race. There's something funny going on. I'm like, all right, man.
T Grog, each person in the stream believes in a different God. Amazing. Have you been around when we talk about the God of your own understanding? Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think it's the same God. Alan, what up?
What's going on, guys? Just one idea that is helpful that's coming out of this. It's sort of derivative of what we're talking about, is just the ability to, when you actually, when Alex O'Connor was talking about like Ben Shapiro poning people, it's like, it becomes like the gift of actually engaging with people is that it breaks down the idols of like, well, all of life is like, when I get to university, I just need to make straight A's, and then I just need to get, the banking job, and then this. Like, you cut away so much of life because you're like, well, everything can be condensed into known quantities, and then I just have to optimize along the path that I want to optimize along. Whether that's like, I want to be an investment banker and make an infinite amount of money. I want to get as many dates as possible. I want to be perceived as the smartest person in the room. And it's like, so much of, living in New York City is people who are here because they're like, I want to optimize. This is the place to become the most famous fashion model in the world. This is the place to make the most money in the world. Yeah, that's why I'm here, to be the most famous fashion model. I just got my long sleeve polo from Banana Republic. So,
One time I wasn't a model, but one time I attended a New York City model Bible study, where all these Christian models gathered to have Bible study together.
Oh, that was lovely. That was probably a really fun place to be a fly on the wall.
I was never a dancer, but
I would have never been able to tell.
I had to do dances when I was a part of an evangelical dance troupe when I was a kid.
Okay, I want to just highlight one more T-Grove thing before I leave.
Oh, I so want those videos to emerge.
They're out there, Paul. They're out there.
So this, God of my own understanding equals God of my own imagination. Yeah, now read George MacDonald's essay on the imagination.
Yeah, this is a disparaging of the imagination. I will not
have it. You could also say that the Logos in Jesus is God's imagination, and we exist within the imagination of God. T-Grog, you have just like it's like, are you smarter? It's like, get Jeff Foxworthy in here and just like, are you smarter than a fifth grader? And like a smart fifth grader, come on. Whatever. Here we go. Yes. Parsons gets it because Parsons likes Peter Rollins.
Paul's doing his own little show this morning. I think it's lovely.
I'm a very happy person who loves mornings, and I have, though, in my marriage. So my wife has already gone to work, so now I can be happy because she's like hates mornings, so it's just like, then she leaves the house. It's like, woo, it's a new day.
That's a clip.
T-Grog, it's not. I'm not insulting you when I say that. It's just like you can't dunk like LeBron too. It's not insulting you. You know. I mean, what do you? Come on. Do you want me to put on like kitty gloves when we're having an intellectual conversation? You don't want that. Okay, Jess, bring the nice. I've been too mean. I've been too unironic and unwinsome this morning.
I mean, everyone's all right. I love T-Grog. I love everyone. I love
Thank
Alan.
you.
I love Paul. I think everything's perfect. We live in the best of all possible worlds.
Well, I just got back from Franklin, and it literally is perfect. Nothing bad ever happens in Franklin, Tennessee. Yeah, there's no evil thoughts. You're not allowed to have them. So I just got back from there, and we should all just move there and be perfect and shiny, happy people. So
Nice.
I do have to jump to a meeting, but yeah, I've seen the promise. I've seen the world to come, and it's called Franklin, Tennessee, and we'll all be happy, and there'll be no homeless people or sick people there. So,
wow,
That's good.
That's good. Bring some of that magic to NYC.
Okay, so see ya, Alan, thanks. So how do you distinguish imagination from reality? Again, I wouldn't. I think imagination is reality. But
imagination is it's a sense we have to apprehend reality. It's an
organ of
it's an organ of perception.
But the way he's using it again to do the Alex O'Connor thing, because again, this is the Boy Scout thing. I think what T-Grog is saying in my language would be, how do you distinguish delusion from reality?
Yeah, that's
truth from bullshit, fact from fiction.
Yeah, there is delusion in the world, obviously, but that imagination isn't all delusion, because you can use your imagination to sense meaning in the world.
Right. This is also like what. Okay, I'm gonna cut myself off after this.
I love you, Chad.
I love Chad.
I gotta give a shout out.
It's like was it PBK? You'll probably know this. Wasn't it Jordan Peterson that was talking about imagination is actually the thing that allows you to engage in science, because you have to imagine and think of the place where you're going to even do science, and it's the difference between bricklayer science that Heather Heying was talking about and the kind of imagine that can think of a completely new paradigm and way of understanding everything that revolutionizes science. You have to have imagination, T-Grog. I mean,
yeah. It's funny. It's just funny. That's why he's so much like a bot in chat. I mean, so Rick had this hilarious thing on Twitter this morning where he had this meme about socialism where these guys have this giant fork and a giant wall outlet and they're supposed to put it in, and Rick got he got sort of put in the Facebook naughty house because it was the thing was about suicidality and eating disorders. And it's like, it was just incredibly hilarious how obviously this was some AI bot that, degraded Rick's Facebook channel. But I mean, so many of the tweets are like that. And so that's what makes it fun, because it's just so hilarious.
Yeah.
That's why he keeps reminding me of the guy in my Bible studies, because the guy in my Bible study just has his script, and by the time he says 5 words, we already know the story he's going to tell and what point he's going to make, and we're all kind of, but he can't get over those points, so he has to keep putting them forward, and no matter what anyone says, like, he's got to just do it again and again, and he'll probably never change, and it's fine.
And if it was a bot, we just ban it. But that it's a human being, it's like we keep watching. Like, wow.
Well, because T-Grog is interesting. Like, it's interesting that a guy. Hi, T-Grog. I'm sorry to talk about you in the third person.
But he also, he left. He said he has to go do something productive for his health. But
that's good. I'm glad he's doing that.
But I'm glad that he's here. Like I was saying earlier, I get very bored in groupthink things. I actually get uncomfortable. Like if I'm in a place where everybody's saying the same stuff all the time, I start to just be like, okay, what's wrong? What's happening? Yeah. Like I feel like I'm in.
Are you serious, Luke?
Yes.
It does get annoying though that it kind of will take over a space.
What will?
like T-Grog, like I know, Paul, you made like a conscious decision to let it take over the stream, but like that stream, I was like a little annoyed. I was like, and then the guy in my Bible study, he will take over half the Bible study with his people talking to him and responding to him, and everything is directed towards him after that point. And this last Sunday, we read the passage, and I thought he was going to go off because it's in Peter's sermon, and Peter talks about how he mentions predestination, that this was predestined. And I was like, all right, here we go. He's going to go off on his rant about predestination, but he had fallen asleep and the conversation was just wonderful. And he was there asleep in his chair. And then he woke up, and and he never heard that part. And so I was like, okay, good. It's nice when they fall asleep.
So I'll say this, and then I'm really gonna leave. Mark, sorry that we're passing in the night. Yeah, because I always feel the pressure to leave, and my wife's here today, so it's more pressure.
60 seconds, Luke.
Okay, go.
40
seconds. I think neither side is appropriately steel manning the other. Okay. I don't think you're grappling with T-Grog fairly, and I don't think he's grappling with you fairly. Therefore, you keep talking past each other. And I love you.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing you. Let me put on the video, even though I'm completely a mess. I've not done my makeup today. I want you to, but I really think he makes some good points that are worthy of attention. And I just don't think you guys I don't think either of you are really addressing each other fully.
Well,
could you articulate?
It's not like people haven't tried. I mean, there's a lot, and so I look forward to talk with him. So, and I'd sit down with him. Right. It's fine. I don't have any problem with it. But the funny thing is that it's to try to get at. And this is kind of where everything has gone. It's like I'm really angry that I can't remove these spark plugs with my fork. And so you just keep going at it with the fork, and you say it's all about the fork. And at some point you want to say, you can keep trying to work that spark plug with this fork, but and at some point then you just sort of give up, because, and it's like Jess said, that doesn't mean he doesn't have any points to make. But what's so interesting about this community is that enough people have sort of gotten beyond where he's at, but not fully beyond, which is why he still has purchase. And to me, that's the interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and Mark, it's more like, for me, it's more, I think he's serving a purpose. I'm not trying to eradicate T-Grog or the Biblicists, but in my opinion, what led to the meaning crisis was the spirit that's behind biblicism, behind scientism, behind all of ideological possession in the closed system of rationality is what led to the meaning crisis, because it objectified reality and removed the perceiver. And so going back to that in whatever form you like isn't the way forward.
Or what I think you're just touching on something there on my point. I think that where you're missing each other is that neither of you are willing to face the weaknesses of your own position. He's articulating weaknesses that he sees in your position. You articulate weaknesses that you see in his. What I would suggest is embracing. And this is the kind of the dialogue I want to have with him, is I want to acknowledge all the strengths of his position and then move on. See if we can move on, because there is a need to move on, right? I'm going through, like, watching Sam's thing on Sam's got to be under his bonnet about the Trinity. And I understand, because he's been wrongfully treated by Trinitarians for it his whole life. And then I go over to my buddy Ron Copperman's channel. He interviewed that poor girl who blew her brains out practically with psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
And all I see, I mean, what I find is the more people talk about God, the less I want to believe in God. I mean, all of this metaphysical, you know, I don't, we're idolaters. You know, none of us are good. No, not one. Paul had it right. And I'm just like, I just find this so unfruitful, this process of, how do I make this fruitful? How do I get past this so that I don't walk away with my faith destroyed by all of this chatter? And I think the way to do it is loving my neighbor, deep empathy, getting in. And I really, 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 really want to understand T-Grog, and I want him to feel understood.
Yeah, but I think
then we can get somewhere. And maybe he'll do the same for me.
He doesn't care if he feels understood.
I don't believe that.
That's not his motivation.
No, human beings by nature. He wouldn't. He's not a robot.
I know. I'm not saying he's a robot. I'm just saying that is not his main motivation. He doesn't care. He doesn't really want to be heard. That's not like a felt need of his.
If that were the need, it would have been addressed a long time ago.
Yeah, people have heard him out, and it's obviously not scratching the itch that he keeps bringing. And
but you're not here. But you need to hear him.
I have,
and you're not. You guys keep talking about stuff.
We are.
Stuff.
The thing is, Mark, it's not that he wants to be heard. He wants to be heard and understood by every single one.
No,
and if what you're saying is true, that's what I'm saying. If what you're saying is true, one person wouldn't be enough. It would have to be each and every one of us, and we'd all have to abide by a certain creed of the T-Grog Church of Masterful Faith, and it's just ridiculous. He wants to play a different game. He wants to wrestle. It's banter. It's not.
So it's kayfabe.
Yeah. It's kayfabe.
Yeah, well, it's the difference between...
But I don't know that motivation, and I'm not convinced it is, and I'd like to know more. So I want to talk to him. So hopefully he'll make contact with me. I did my best to communicate.
I mean, you and I have had similar differences about things that we've talked about that are contentious, and we're unwilling to be moved by those out of our position on either of those things. And
does anyone here know the meaning of the word profillant? I might be PVK might be the only one who knows what it is. It's Frisian, profillant, and my friend would use it to describe, I might be pronouncing it completely wrong, when you are like slappy, when you've gotten tired, but you're not, what that means is you start messing with your friends, and you start like purposely causing problems, and everyone is coming at these conversations like people want to get at a real ending, as opposed to being slappy and hitting each other, and jibes and having fun. A ton of the things I say to my wife, right? No, perfect example. Does anyone actually think that Paul wants to stab us?
Yes.
Right? Paul just did the motion of stabbing us. If we took him serious in that action, we would be ridiculous. Right?
Yeah, but that, again, there's like the story from, there's no story from nowhere. I mean, because like I've played this mode with my wife that you're talking about, where I was kind of giving her shit about her what do they call that that you can't breathe, asthma. I used to give her shit that asthma was fake because Stephen King said it in a book once, and so then I would like give her shit about her asthma, and then I was fairly certain that she knew I was just kidding. Well, one day she just wasn't in the mood for it. She got really fucking pissed. She's like, I can't believe you're fucking talking to me like you think that I'm just making up my asthma. And I'm like, you know, I'm just kidding. And she's like, no, I don't. But later on, you know, months later, we talked about it, and she knew exactly that I was kidding. But the problem is I'm always kidding. And so, like, it's a lot of this is just kind of like where each of us are standing at each given moment, whether it's what side of the bed did I wake up on, and all this bullshit that we're always like wading through. Kayfabe all the way down, baby. I mean, I think it's a mix of kayfabe and love, and I think Mark Parker is right to a degree. We want to be seen and heard. I think that's true, but there's the problem with being seen and heard is like sometimes it's like, yeah, I've been exactly where you are. I've seen it. I've heard it. I actually believed it at one point, and now I don't. The problem is you don't want to be seen. You don't want to come to my way of thinking, and so it's just bullshit, guys. It's all good. It's all good.
And question: when PVK was pretending to stab us, did he want to be understood? Was that he wanted us to understand him?
Yes.
Was that at all? It's like, to me, that's the wrong wording. It's like, no, he wanted to be a silly boy, which is the other part, which is like, there is no girl Tigran. What he's doing is a very male, kind of punchy, slappy, propellant action, where it's like, yeah. And that's also why I think people like Food Truck Emily get so frustrated, because it's like, wait, why are you guys trying to why are you addressing the arguments like he means them? Right?
Yeah, well, it's a very feminine medium, though, guys. It's a super feminine medium with YouTube.
Even the word understand, I don't think the word understand is correct. I think experience. He wants us to experience how he's interacting with it, not understand.
The T. Grogan experience.
So
I gotta go.
All right, see, Chad.
There's something I want to say. I have been put in a place where I get to experience different people's perspectives, including difficult situations, difficult attacks, criticisms. I work in a lockdown behavioral unit, so I do get to experience weird ideas, weird conversations, and weird criticism of my character, my profession, my motives, my, on and on. And I've been there for over 6 years, and I still consider that my home. But I do know that everybody, even though people say, well, appears to be similar modes, they do have a different, let me say it like this. They want a different outcome. Some want just like friendship, but they don't know how that, they don't know what healthy friendship is. So they try to do their best. Others want to know what you know. So they'll pick at you to see who you are. They want to know who you are. Others want to shape you, right? So they're like, no, I'm here to convince you because you are wrong and you didn't even know you were wrong. And they, like I said, it doesn't matter what you say. They don't hear what you say. They just want you, the opposite. No. I want you to hear me because you are wrong and you didn't even know you're wrong. So even though we are all people, there's different reasons why people say certain things. And some people actually only want the reaction from you. I'll give you an example. Some people will poke you. And the minute the minute you give in and you let emotions take over you and you react, they are like, give me the manager because you just violated me, and they instantly become the victims. And the manager doesn't, the manager doesn't want to hear that you got poked 20 times. Nope. It's how you react. They poke you 20 times, you take it, it's like Jesus, right? how many times should I forgive? 7? No, 70 times 7. That's what our managers would say. Nope. They poke you 20, expect 20 more. And after that, expect 20 times 7. So we and when you don't react, they play their algorithm. They play it out to its fullest. And once they don't react to you, they're like, well, you're no fun. And then they move on to the next person until someone is more sensitive or inexperienced and they blow up and they're like, aha, I got you. Give me the manager. Mm-hmm. But others don't want that. They don't want the reaction. They actually want some, if I may call it fellowship, some type of friendship, some type of something. And they're
actually fellowship. Like
yeah,
we are,
yes,
the same.
Yeah.
Which again, not understanding fellowship. Like you and I are the same. That's what we want, right? I've talked about this before, that I feel that for a lot of people, like for myself, my major the most disheartening and discouraging things in my faith has been people that I love leaving the faith. Here's the thing. Their reasons for leaving might be terrible reasons. They're not intellect. So there's an element of our faith, which is without a doubt of everyone's belief structure, which is a pyramid scheme, in that it only works if more people buy into it, right? So we feel in that we become one body, we become joined with other people, we become discouraged by them leaving, even if the reason they leave the faith is for dumb reasons. It doesn't have to be for a good reason.
That's because, believe it or not, we are affected by other people, whether we like to admit it or not. We do care what they think about us, whether they're right or not, and their criticisms. We still are affected, and we will question ourselves, and we will question our motives, and we will question our beliefs, and we will question the whole structure. And that is, I mean, if a person doesn't feel, then they're a robot. They're not a person. They're it's like these AI, right? They seem to talk, but they don't have a soul. They don't have emotions. They don't have a conscience. They don't have self-criticism.
I think part of it's going to be really interesting to see how Mark and T-Grog go, because my prediction is they'll have a lovely conversation, because we've watched this a number of times with T-Grog. They'll have a lovely conversation, and Mark will validate a lot of Tim's points, and things will go. But then when Tim gets back into the chat, it will be the same. And so, and again, I think part of what's interesting to me is that, and I think Sam Tiedemann is a good example of this, because, for a lot of us, of course, every one of Sam's videos Algo puts it up on my screen because I watch plenty of Sam. And then generally speaking, it'll be, another Trinity video. And so on. And with Luke, we do the same thing with Luke. That, Luke is another, I can't even repeat the Lukeisms, but I know one when I see one. And Jess, it's the book of Job. And plenty of commenters out there, I like PVK, but will you please stop talking about Jordan Peterson? We all have these fascinations, but I think you're really right, David, in that we do want fellowship. And what sort of happened in the corner, which is really fun, is that we have we seem to have arrived at a degree of fellowship with Sam, even with his Trinitarian obsession, and with Jess with his Job obsession, and his Luke with his, I can't even name the Luke obsession, but I know it when I see it. And with Mark and Mark is just, Mark D. Parker, the serial killer, is actually a tremendous peacemaker. And so each of us have these little obsessions, but part of what's fun about the corners, we've sort of found ways to integrate the people with their obsessions. The T-Grog is a particularly difficult nut to crack, because what's interesting is that most of us believe there won't be any resolution to the T-Grog script after Mark D. Parker's conversation with him. And it doesn't mean that, some of T-Grog's criticisms of me or Luke or Peterson or Christianity or Calvinism, it doesn't mean there's nothing valid in any of that. But as you know, Food Truck Emily and Upcycle, some people are just tired of that game. They're tired of, you know, as Chad, and I think Chad has a particular sense, a particularly evolved sensibility to this, as somebody mentioned in the comment section, because you see this a lot with, you'll see it a ton in a 12-step program, because we all have our little stuckness, but some people's stuckness becomes a really big problem in their lives. And it doesn't mean they can't go to work or they can't manage money or anything, but they, just like Jess said with this person in the Bible study, their stuckness in a particular point is really getting in the way of having the kind of relationships that they actually really want. And so what's been interesting about the corner is that many of us have our own little stucknesses, but we've also sort of found a way to have our relationships with one another to the degree that we can laugh with Luke about his Lukeisms, and people can laugh with me about my crazy things, but we can still actually get beyond into a meaningful. Sometimes I watch some of Sam's stuff and I think, Sam and I should really have a big video about the Trinity together, about why I believe it and, you know, he doesn't. But we don't really get after why I believe it and what he doesn't, because everyone imagines that, you know, and this is the rationalist game. I mean, I finally said to T. Grog on Twitter this morning, I said, you know, there's this little saying that basically says, you can't reason someone out of a position that they don't hold rationally. And he kind of threw it back at me like, aha, see, you too. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. We don't hold any of these positions in terms of the rationalist dream of how to arrange human commitment and cognition, because that's not how we work. But
people don't realize that that's one of the things that Reformed theology is trying to address.
Yeah,
is that like people find it so insulting, but its insinuation is that you do not merely hold your opinions because you rationally came to them.
Right.
Well, what would the world be without boundaries? I mean, what would the world look like without boundaries? It's 2-year-olds trying to do their thing. Take 20, 40 2-year-olds and no boundaries, and everybody want what they want, and everything's right in their own mind. And what do you have?
Well, I don't understand the connection between the rationality and the boundaries, Alex.
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying is, and this is where, thank you for how I'll explain. We all seem to think that remember, we could all be wrong, but we all have this mindset of, I know what's right. And this is the boundary. And I want you to adopt my point of view. Therefore, I want you to adopt that same boundary, and don't break that boundary, because then you're going to, and they can't let go of that bone, because they seem to think like, no, you're wrong. Let me show you how you're wrong. But where does it end? Like I said, we need boundaries, but yet everybody has a different of an idea which boundaries are the real boundaries, because my boundary is different than your boundary. My right, Trinity, non-Trinity. Remember, it's supposed to be a stance, and like no. See, I'm right, you're wrong, and the other person is vice versa. No, I'm right, you're wrong, and on it goes, because there has to be some form of truth, an ultimate truth. If we say we are Christians, there are some times where we're going to hear something that just contradicts what we seem to think, and I emphasize what we seem to think, and that's why we go around in circles.
Right. Go ahead, David.
No. I was actually just going to say, I can see that Jess has been percolating for quite a while, and we're the more extroverted types, and I want to know some of his thoughts, because he's been quiet for a little bit, and I think some of this is more fun.
I want to see them accompanied with dance, though. I really want that.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
No, I kind of felt like I already said what I had to say, and so I was letting you guys go on.
Okay.
What were you saying, Dave?
I wanted to introduce the concept of a shit test. I think shit test is such an important thing to know about as well. Like, so the shit test, for those who don't know, is one of the things that's brought up in pickup culture, where someone is essentially pushing you to see what your boundaries are. They want to see what your reaction is, and that it's actually a test as to whether or not, like, if you, how do I explain it? It's very funny because I think a shit test on the surface sounds like the most sexist thing ever. But whenever I've explained what a shit test is to a woman, they've all been like, oh, and like it makes them super happy that there is such a term. So this one time, my wife, we have a bunch of people coming over. And my wife says, we can't have these people over because the kitchen isn't cleaned. Okay, I clean the kitchen. Okay, I say, well, I can clean the kitchen. I start cleaning it. And she says, what if we, she says, well, we can't have them over because I don't want the dishes to be dirty because we have to go somewhere right after. We're not going to have time to clean up. I said, oh, okay. Well, I have these, we have some paper plates and stuff we can all hang out. Okay, well, but the house isn't in a good enough state. Okay, we could be outside. And then she gets very, very frustrated, pauses and says, I just don't want anyone over right now. And I was just like, it was so funny because she didn't know why. She just starts giving reasons, and the reasons are not actually what she's about, right? Yeah. And somewhere into a marriage, I've talked about this a bunch of times in other places, so sorry for repeating myself. If when you're in an argument, you only address what the person is saying, you're an idiot because they're getting at something and they sometimes don't even know what they're getting at. So if you just talk about what they're talking about, then you're an idiot.
Well, isn't that what Jordan Peterson says about we all try to avoid the difficult conversation and we dance around the elephant in the room, but we never, because we want to avoid that difficult conversation. Well, and I
mean, sometimes we don't know. That's the thing that stands out to us, and we fixate on it. And so we're doing a dance and we're waiting for someone to kind of like, hey, you're actually talking about this. And you're like, oh, you know. That
would like, while writing, I came across this because me and a friend, the first script I ever wrote, I wrote with a buddy of mine. And we started off by writing these monologues, some of which we integrated into the script, some of which were just to get into the character's mindset. And I read my friend's monologues and I was like, wait, this app, like they believe this? And my friend was like, I don't care. And it's so dumb, but I was like, oh, characters can lie. People lie. They don't just say the things that they actually mean and want. They lie all the time.
David, I'll take it one level further. We even lie to ourselves and constantly.
Yeah, without ourselves knowing it even.
Yeah. We lie to others, and worse, we lie to ourselves.
The biggest lie, though, that I realized is people thinking that something's going well. Like when they lie and they're like, this is going really well for me. I love that lie so much. They're like, no one even notices.
But there is a need for, because people often wonder, like, why can't you just be friendly when someone wants to have you? Why don't you just give in, right? Why don't you just be the bigger person and just say, okay, I accept your point of view, and from here on out, I'm going to adopt that point of view, right? As if it was a non-trivial thing the people that are giving you the advice, like, why don't you just give in? Why don't you compromise, right? And sometimes those two ideas might be trivial and sometimes not so much. And I'll give you a historical example. Martin Luther, I think we all know it, whether we're Protestant or not, right? Whether we're Catholic or in Orthodoxy, we all know who Martin Luther was. And he was in the Catholic Church, and he had the option to yield, to give in. After all, he was not the leader, right? He was pushing back. He saw something that's like, I don't like this. I don't like where this is going. I don't like where this has been. And should he have yielded? How different will the world, how different would the world be if he would have been like, I don't want to rock the boat. I should compromise. I should give in, and I should adopt this concept, this reality, which I don't like, but I don't want to rock the boat.
My
world would be
owns
different right now.
My friend owns a pair of Lutheran socks. They say in German on the bottom of them. He bought them. He bought them in Germany, and they just say, "Here I stand. I can do no other."
We might still be we might still be going to church and hearing it in Latin, even though we don't speak Latin. That's the kind of world that could have been, maybe.
Frankly, I don't think we would understand it any less if that's what we did. I think we don't know what we're talking about. What I want to know is why do we think we're any less depraved as Christians than we were before we became Christians?
Well,
why are we any less slaves to sin because we're in the church?
The difference is we have a new leader. Before Christianity, my leader was my sinful nature and my sinful prompts, and simple prompts were given, I followed.
There's only. I'm sorry, Alex. Let me push back just a little bit. There's only been one leader ever. Yeah, well, you just didn't know it.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification. You're right. And there's only one leader, but I chose to ignore his prompts over my sinful prompts, and I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm doing this, and I followed the cue of the sinful prompt. I ran that program. Sinful temptation.
But it's just.
Let's run that program.
I'm sorry.
Let's run it.
I have to interrupt.
No more
because
now in Christianity, I can hear both, and I choose. Now I get to choose to a degree, and even when
I so disagree with everything you're saying right now, because
you're more than welcome to disagree.
And this is part of the trying to figure out what people are getting at. I'm more on Mark's side right now. Is that like Yon God? I love Yon God, and I like the way he's trolling. And I have friends who are atheists who I kept longer than friends who are Christians, because there are friends of mine, or like people that I knew who were Christian. Like, has no one ever met a youth pastor who's just in it for the girls? Like,
are they born again?
Well, exist. And they might say everything they say. I might agree with their theology, but I completely disagree with what they're actually getting.
By their fruit, I think we got the advice of by their fruit you will know them. Not by the words. By their words you will know them. That wasn't the teaching. The teaching was by their fruits you will know them.
Yeah, I know atheists with better fruit.
There you are. There you are. But there you are. And guess what? The good news is that I'm not going to be their judge, and neither any of us. We're all going to perish. This is what I was saying in the other live stream, that 300 years ago, we had a ton of people that were on all different camps: atheists, non-atheists, Calvinists, non-Calvinists, Protestant. It didn't matter. Some that believed, some that partially believed, and guess what? They all perished. Now, if you say there is no judge, then all Christians are like wasting your right. If Christ didn't rise from the grave, we're all wasting our time, says Paul in Romans, or somewhere in there, right? So
Alex,
eventually, if they're doing it for gain and not for Christ, eventually, we all are going to be in front of Him.
So I want to use this as an example, because I don't know, Alex, if you actually want to have a conversation right now.
Why do you say that?
Because
would you like a different answer than the one I gave?
No. It's not.
You want to choose an answer
exactly
for me?
What I'm saying. This is the example that I would actually use. Is that I want to hear what Jess has to say, and I feel I have to interrupt you in order to hear it because you're ranting.
Oh, okay.
And so,
well, I'm not opposed to giving the floor. I'm okay with that.
Because I don't know what you're getting at, and that's part of it. Is like
it's okay if you don't understand my answer. That's okay,
and I get the
that's
answers,
okay.
but I don't know what you're getting at.
You're right. Let me. Sorry, I must have been speaking in Spanish, but that's okay. Let's hear what Jess has to say.
Oh, oh no! I feel like I'm in the middle of like a fight and like.
Well, no, it's okay.
No pressure, Jess. No pressure.
Here's what I was.
I'm under the impression that I'm not letting you speak.
Like Mark's point about, like, shouldn't we like have some self-humility about ourselves, like as much as we did before we were sick or whatever. There is that, but there's also a point where you just have to say how things seem to you and you stand up for your point of view. And because there are people that will just have more sort of confidence in their ideas and they'll put them forth forcefully, and you kind of have to meet them where they're at. So if you come with too much humility, or I wouldn't even say humility, if you come with too much passivity and welcoming towards someone who's very aggressive and self-assured, you're not doing them any favors, and you're not doing anyone any favors. So you basically you meet people where they're at. If they're very self-confident and very assertive, unless they're like very immature in very specific ways, you can basically dish it out how they dish it out, and most of the time that will be received approvingly. Like, David, I like what you said about the shit test, because at some point you say, I'm not putting up with any more shit, and then they go then they laugh. That's what the mature person who's dishing out shit to push.
Yeah.
The immature person will like say, oh, get me the manager. Like, that's the immature person. So but automatically you can decipher like what category someone is in. Is like someone who laughs after you stop putting up with their shit. That's a good person. Ultimately, I feel like the person who calls the manager, that's a bad person that you can't engage with. And on, you have to basically just point out to them, and hopefully they can understand. You'd be like, do you understand that I'm treating you like you're treating me, and you are offended and you are beside yourself because you can't take it? So like, when it comes to, I haven't had any conversations with T-Grog really, but if I talk to him, like however we would interact, I'd try to match his level. And if he's, with the guy in my Bible study, he's very confident in what he says. And so then I'll say something confident back, and then he'll say something like, you're a Laodicean Christian, you're lukewarm. And I'm like, I don't think I am. Like, prove it. And then he'll just like laugh at me. And then our conversation ends and we see each other next Sunday. And it's kind of like one of those things where I'm like, I don't necessarily like approach him to have these conversations, but he's welcome here. And, and then also that's just the way he is. And it's something you kind of have to put up with while he's around a little bit. And if he's, I don't know, there's my little rant.
Well, and the reason why is because sometimes there are trivial things, right?
The what?
But the thing about T-Grog is these are he wants to remember. I'm trying to quote him, and I'm going to try to paraphrase him because I don't remember his direct quotes. But pretty much saying, your belief system that you believe in and you trust, and that you have given your life over, and you've changed your lifestyle. You're doing all this, and guess what? It's all fake, right? Those are to someone that believes, like someone that's a Christian. When they hear that, that's not a trivial thing.
Right.
And then they're saying it in a public space. That's not a trivial thing. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes there are times where it's like, right? Trivial things. But the stuff that he wants to say, you know what? What you believe is all fake. They're the con artist, right? It's all a lie.
Yeah.
Right? He will say, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. On and on and on. It doesn't matter who it is. Even the guys that what's the latest convert? He's been on Jordan Hall. So Jordan Hall, he's just like relentless, just criticizing his conversion. It's like he wants to tear down everything that's sacred. That's not a trivial thing. And how can you just say, oh yeah, you're what does PBK say? Is like he's calling people's great grandmothers a whore as a metaphor, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on whether you think it's worth getting in a fight over or not, or you just say, I like what you're saying is ridiculous.
Well, it's not I wouldn't say it's a fight.
No, I mean,
it's a battle of ideas. Yes.
Like it is serious. He's like, your faith is a joke. And I'm like, I'm sorry you think that. Like, what else am I going to say? Like but you could make it into a fight by going at him, or you can stop engaging. Like, I think these options are available. Because my faith doesn't rely on whether someone else believes in it or not.
Well, that's the good news, that it's not up to T-Grog, right? When I die, it's not like God's going to say, T-Grog, come here. What should we do with this guy here, right? It's not up to T-Grog. It's not up to me. It's not up to you guys. It's not up to my neighbor. It is up to Christ. If he is the Messiah, right? If he says, I am the way, me believing that, right? If Jesus is not real, then I'm wasting my time as a Christian. And that's exactly what T-Grog is saying. But this is not like a trivial thing. Like, oh, I didn't like that movie.
Yeah. Well, here, let me ask this question. See what you guys think. I kind of see this as almost so. There's this cultivated space where we're having these conversations. It's this little corner of the internet. We're talking a certain way. We have a certain way of going about things. And then someone comes in and is sort of playing a different game. They want to, let's just say they want to go back to a old school debate style conversation. And not that there's anything wrong with debate, but that's not the type of environment this is here. So what do? You welcome someone in and they're just playing a different game. Like when do you give them the boot? Like how many chances? Like give them some chances.
Right.
Talk to them.
Yeah, you're trying to play chess and they're using checker rules. Yeah.
Yeah, but at some point you're just like, you are ruining the space, and this is where you have to like protect something of value. So not everything
boundaries
will develop into battlefields, because we want gardens as well. There's a battle. There are places for battlefields. But we would like to have gardens as well, and we can't necessarily have both in the same area.
Like I said, boundaries. What are the boundaries?
Right.
Is there boundaries? Is there guidelines?
And then you need battle lines to protect your garden. So something like that. The world is a magical place.
The world is unique because we. Right. We all have our own little worlds, and we all see what we want to see and believe what we want to believe. And sometimes we're right, and sometimes we're wrong, and it is a very interesting place for that very fact that we're all different.
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to jump in and say, like, if
example, I'm just using an example of maybe there's somebody who like has gone through deconstruction, and then let's say they go to a group like this, and then they're like, well, holy shit, you guys aren't even questioning the God that I rejected. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're like, I might even not even need to go down this route. And that's like, I've created this whole new world now. And now you're not even going after the God I completely, gave up on. You have this other image, and like, I can't accept, you know what I'm saying? They closed down the conversation in that way that, might have, had they come to this group earlier, maybe they may have been like, holy shit, like you don't have to go down those possible, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's that weird thing where I know T. Grog has said this before. He's like, I really know the Bible because I used to believe in it, and now I'm this, and now I need to convince you to do the same thing. And then there's other people that are saying to him, I used to be in the same place you were. I was an atheist, and now I came to belief because of this and this and this. And so there's this weird swapping sides, and both people think they have an understanding of the other person's side, and so there is some level of ignoring going on, because like, I don't really have to take your Christian statement seriously because I've already done that. I'm done with that. I've already like put a stamp on it, sealed it up. It's done with. And what I need to do is like tell you about this other stuff that you don't seem to know, because if you knew it, you would be an atheist. And then the other person's doing the same thing. I used to be an atheist, and I had, had all the arguments down and but then, God came to me, or I was convinced some otherwise. Now I became a Christian, and all the atheist stuff I put a stamp on, and I'm not opening that box again just because this rando comes into the conversation.
Well, that's the beauty of this space, and it's just like the beauty of this country. We don't have to force you to believe in this. We don't have to force you to have this political idea. We don't have to force you to read this book. We don't have to force, well, I guess if you're in public school, I guess you're stuck with that. But anyways, as an adult, you don't have to force someone to believe what you believe. And in this space, we can agree to disagree. I don't have to adopt your views.
That's
the beauty of freedom. That is a beauty of freedom.
Yeah. I think that's the point, is like, this space opens an opportunity for you to search out where you are lacking, where you've come up against things you haven't been willing to look into, and contradictions that may even your points of view right now, and you run up against those other people. And yeah, and that can be antagonistic, because that's going to cause flare-ups for people like, that's my world, man. You're questioning my world. And that's very anxiety inducing in a way. But also for me, I think it's very free, but that's just me.
I'm going to have to plug this in. Give me 1 sec.
Yeah. I mean,
I was planting a church one time, and my friend's wife was part of the group, and she was very, very new to Christianity. And we were all like talking about how things went one time, and she was really worried she was going to offend me, because I was keep on pushing her. How did this go? And she was like, honest. And then she finally was just like, I didn't understand. I was lost and I was bored. And I was like, thank God. Like, what I meant was, like, I told her, I said, she was so worried because she's like, I'm completely new to this, so maybe my opinion doesn't matter. And I went, no. I need your perspective. If the things I'm saying make sense to me but aren't making sense to you, what the hell am I doing? Like, this idea of losing people, offending, all this stuff, it's like there might actually be some very important information there, not like, well, not my opinion. That's not what I want. Kind of thing.
But there's a reason why we do what we do. And I think I said this before. We first get this experience of trying to, and I'm going to say this, but please give me a minute to explain what I mean, where we want to control and change other people. And we want them to see the reality that we perceive as reality. And I'll give you an example. I'm a parent, so we first begin to see this in the terrible twos, where the child is already becoming an individual, and the favorite word is no. and they want to play with knives, and they want to do this, and they want to eat dog food, or they want to do all this stuff. And this is the first time that you're like, holy smokes, I got to do something about this other person. And how do I get to change them, right? Because you remember, this is where we're forced, well, by and large, we're forced to do something about somebody else, where now we have to control their behavior, control that. We have to find a way to explain why, right? Because they lack the life experience. And sometimes, I mean, I can testify for myself. I took a long time to mature, and my wife will probably say, well, Alex, I think you still need to mature some more. So, and that's why we have such difficulty being in crowds and talking to people, especially because most people do want to, in some way, change you, directly or indirectly, passively or aggressively, in some way, shape, or form. We influence each other, whether we like to admit it or not, and it's hard to turn that off.
Mm-hmm. Mark, what do you think?
Edison has cut off my power, so I have no idea how so I could drop at any second. Just hopefully, Jess, you don't feel hurt or injured or offended by how I talked earlier.
No. Sure. I understand you, Mark.
There's I go back to John Wimber's question to a conference of pastors he spoke to 40 years ago. And the question was, how many Christians like you do you want to be around? It's really a good question to meditate upon. I won't really add to it. Let you guys just mull it over. But
what do you mean? Like in a good way or a bad way? Is he asking that?
Do you want a church that looks just like you? No, I mean, I'm saying that to myself too. I mean, that's a question. I don't want a church that looks just like me. That's a nightmare. I mean, I need you all to be yourselves, but we all need to be ourselves with, it's Micah 6:8, with some humility, with some understanding that we don't have the full picture. This is what I'm finding. I'm really discouraged. I mean, I went through this last night. I guess I bounced around through several different corner videos. Like I said, the interview that Ron did. It wasn't the interviewee. It was my buddy Ron's position towards the interviewee. It was. I love Sam, but. The thing is I completely empathize with Sam's interest and pursuit of the subject of the Trinity, but I'm not getting what's communicating to me is less scholarship and more about these all of this stuff is we are so much of our talk right now is reflecting more of a state of our inner turmoil than it is shedding light on the subjects we presume to be discussing. For whatever reason, we're engaged in a kind of circular regurgitative act.
That's
like
really
dogs
good,
that just
Mark.
keep returning to our vomit.
Well, Mark, I think there's a reason why we do that.
Really, really good.
And I think there's a reason why we do that, by and large, and not just here, just like.
Well, it's breaking my heart right now, so I'm sorry. It's making me profoundly sad, and that's for me to work out. That's my shit.
Well, so Mark, this is what I'm going to say. So I'll give you an example. So when we, let's say we get invited to a dinner by a friend to meet the friend's friends, right? And let's say also that our let's say we have a sibling our age, and they're part of the group. So they're also going to be going. Now, I'm going to give you 2 examples. One where you're going to feel comfortable with your sibling, your brother or your sister, right? And you're going to say it like it is because you care about them. And the other instance, you're going to be extremely courteous because you don't say what you want to say with the stranger out of politeness. So let's say you're in the restaurant, 2 scenarios, right? And everybody's eating. It's a fine dining experience. Like, oh, this is cool. I haven't done fine dining in like 3 years. And it's all nice and formal, tablecloth. And everybody's eating, and you notice something. Everybody's chewing with their mouth closed. And 2 different scenarios. One, the stranger is eating, slapping, like with their mouth open. You out of courtesy for the stranger, you're not going to say anything. You're like, oh, man. Right? But in the same instance, to the sibling, you're like, hey, don't chew with your mouth open. Right? You know better, right? Our mom, right? If you have the same, remember, if we have the same, we're supposed to have the same ideology, you go to your sibling, like, hey, quit chewing with your mouth open. It's fine dining, right? But you wouldn't do that with the stranger.
Can I hear from David really quick? I've literally got like 5 minutes max, and I've got to be on the road and out of here.
Yes.
So
yeah,
David
Mark,
and Jess, real quick.
Yeah, Mark, I really, really related to what you were saying. I don't engage with God on a very musical level. And for a period of time, I went to a church where they did, like, they would have 3 sections. And one section was like music for like an hour. And I was like, I was purposely going there because this wasn't what I was like. I wanted to be stretched and changed and brought into something new. I've heard you talk, Mark, about this yourself, about your church congregation, that it is like it's considerably more conservative than you yourself might be. And I think that is part of being part of a legitimate body, where you need the right balance between individual and united, where I was on a stream sometime last week, and me and Nate were disagreeing with each other, but it was a really helpful disagreement. And there's other situations where you agree and it's a helpful agreement, and you want the right amount of those things. Because if those are off balance, then it's just like our agreements are all masturbation. And all of our disagreements are also a different form of masturbation. It's not productive. It's just destructive. Jess?
Yeah, I mean, even the fact that we're talking about how we're talking is I think demonstrative of what you're saying, Mark, is that we're having a conversation about how we're having conversations. And that is sort of recursive and circular. Right. And part of it, I think, is fruitful because I think really, if we put it towards like what the estuaries are supposed to be, like that's what an estuary is. It's about a certain type of environment to have a certain type of conversation. And it may be why, and it's also what we're trying to figure out, like what we have been doing. But there also is a sort of self-destructiveness in that we could lose the thread that was there in the beginning, and we just start talking about talking.
And one of the big takeaways with any conversation is there anything to learn? Because if you don't think there's anything to learn, it doesn't matter who's speaking. It doesn't matter what the conversation is about. It doesn't matter what the topic. It doesn't matter. If you don't think there's anything to learn from a conversation, from a textbook, from a book, from anything, then, because isn't that the whole point of a dialogue?
I love what
learning.
Oh, go ahead.
I love what you said, Mark. And it's so the first time I knew Jordan Peterson paid any attention to my channel was when I made a video on why my kids watch The Office. because I was noticing that my teenage kids were watching The Office over and over and over and over again. I was like, well, that's interesting. And I noticed that when they were little kids, they'd watch Pinocchio over and over and over and over again. And I think you're exactly right, Mark, that we all get stuck in certain things. And what's interesting to me is that just like each of us as individuals get stuck in certain things, there is this collective body, which is super subtle and amorphous, that also gets stuck in certain things. And so what's interesting to me is to ask the question, why do, and of course not all of us, because it's that sort of thing, this strange body that we have, why do we get stuck in some things and not others? What are about those things? Because just like with an individual, if you can sort of pause and notice, I'm always stuck on this. And, you know, I love the illustration that David gave earlier that, you know, well, you know, we can't have people over because the dishes in the sink. Okay, I'll do the dishes. Oh, we can't have people out. Well, because the kitchen's a mess. Okay, clean the kitchen. And you get to the point that we just can't have people over. We only discover these things by interacting with each other. And so, again, to me, the really interesting thing about the T-Grog experience is not so much that, because we've all seen Tim online, he's a perfectly wonderful guy, and you know, I would have no problem, you know, giving Tim power of attorney over this or that, even with the tiny little things I know about him. But it's interesting that, okay, what are the issues that, like a dog returns to its vomit, we keep coming round to? And so, you know, it was very interesting, Mark, when you came on and said what you said, because I said, well, that's sort of part of Mark's purpose in this corner, because Mark D. Parker is sort of the he's sort of the border collie of the corner. Make sure nobody gets excluded. Make sure everybody's getting a fair hearing. And so that's your function. And so you do that. And other people are the beagles of the corner, and people pay attention to all this circular talking, and no, we're don't talk about the corner. That's when things go bad. And so to me it's fascinating, because it's by talking to each other that we begin to learn not just who I am as an individual, but to begin to learn what this collective is. And I love also what you said, David, about you're planting this church, and you wanted to get the stark feedback of this woman. I was bored and I didn't understand anything you've said. Oh, good. Now, well, that's important. So a comment
that's important. Something
that's right.
that we can grow on and build on and everything else.
And so I think, and we've had these moments. I mean, what do we do with Jacob Federecci? What do we do with T-Grog? And actually, part of building a community is for the community itself to get a sense of the individuals that sort of bother the community, and to figure out if they're sort of the sand in the oyster that creates the pearl, or if they're and usually, again, what has been the regular criticism of me in terms of my function in the corner is that many people want me to be the editor, where I will say, I'm going to ban T-Grog, I'm going to ban Jacob, I'm going to ban whoever the bad actor is that you think. But for the most part, I really never play that role, partly because I want to see, really, Dallas Willard had this great answer when somebody once asked Dallas Willard, who goes to heaven? And Dallas Willard answered, anyone who can stand it. And and in some ways, that's sort of like this crazy little corner. Who gets to play in this corner? You know what? Anyone who can stand it. So And that's okay. I'm going to keep leaving because I got stuff I got to do, but keep talking.
Paul, sorry. This is on what Paul said. For me personally, I am like, the metaphor I was thinking about is Jesus with the prostitutes versus the Pharisees. It's like he seems more irritated by the Pharisees than he is by the tax collectors and prostitutes, right? And that's part of it. It's a very interesting tradition to be a part of, where the Gospels make it very clear that a lot of the worst people in a group are actually the people who like agree that like have the proper theology. They're actually like way worse than in other situations.
Mark, do you have anything to say? You said you had
Sorry,
to go.
guys. I thought I turned off my mic. I apologize. Thank you for the time, guys, and the talk. And
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, after Paul came on and spoke, it made me think that maybe what we're doing is converting our idols into icons, and that maybe that's what this process is. All of our little tics and obsessions are idols, of course, and then maybe the Lord is using us together, and we only do it together. We can't do it by ourselves. That would be my closing thought.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's kind of reminding me of in the New Testament, they talk about the patience of Job. I think in James, and you think about how was Job patient, because he's lamenting, he's arguing, he's complaining, he's crying out. It's anything but, because normally when we think of patience, we think of someone who's stoically enduring. Sitting
You don't
quietly
think of
with their
someone who
hands on
gets
your
an
lap.
entire chapter of the Bible where they say, hypothetically, what if God just created me to torture me? Right?
Right.
Is this a patient person?
The only way I've been able to see how Job is a patient person, because he's not stoically sitting with his hands in his lap, is that he refused to have any. He refused to let anything but. God has to answer him, and he's not satisfied with anything else. The question he poses, like he's hoping his friends may be able to say something, but when he sees that they can't, he's not satisfied with anything except when God finally comes. And there's something about I was thinking about this, referred to like the things we're stuck on, the things that we're like keep bringing up, sort of the, I'm always talking about Job. Luke's always talking about his thing. PVK is always talking about his thing. Like these are the things we hope one another will be able to help us. And in some ways they do. But there's other things that God will have to answer us, and God will have, and we're not satisfied until that happens.
Can I go in a direction?
Yeah.
I think so. The meta conversation, like the conversation about conversation, I think does have an important part. And I'll give an example from my own life. I came from a family that yelled constantly, all the time. I'm basically Italian, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So just yelling at each other nonstop. And so when I got married, the purpose of the meta conversation is not, hey, isn't that interesting that when we get in an argument, I start yelling at you? It's instead, the purpose of it is to to realize what I do, and then calming, so early, it was actually right before my wife and I got together where I started really, really examining these things about myself. So when my wife and I first got together, she thought that I seemed like a robot when we'd get into fights, because I'd be putting so much effort into speaking calmly. I'd be like, I just felt that what you just said. And she's like, why are you just talking like a person? And it's because of the meta conversation I realized, okay, this is a place where I'm erring, right? And it's a I don't know if I want to talk. I was getting frustrated in the conversation about Alex because that is something that I struggle with myself, where I need to shut up and listen to other people. Mm-hmm. And I desperately want to be the kind of person that makes room for other people. And so then I do rant. It's like other people were even making jokes about it. Like, oh, he's projecting, right? And like, to some extent that's true.
Yeah.
But it's like, I want to be affected by other people. I want to make room, and I want to learn. I want the meta conversation because I want to become better at listening to other people and at saying things that other people want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Is this getting at anything?
Yeah. Well, there is, you know, I kind of, or I expressed like a criticism of the meta conversation, but in some ways, sometimes that is the conversation. It's not, we keep having fights. All right. So how do you guys fight? Well, we fight like this. And then like, once you figure out how to fight, then you have less fights. And so kind of like figuring out how to fight correctly was actually the problem. And like the whole tone of how things come out. And then once you correct that, then you actually correcting the meta conversation actually fixed like all the little fights that you would have, you know, and so, you know, there.
But sometimes it's the opposite, because sometimes it's like you have to say to your spouse, I'm going to say something crazy, but this is how I feel. And I need you not to criticize how I'm about to say this.
Right.
I need you to figure out what I'm getting at.
Right. Well, that's why you have to have a relationship with someone and develop this, because you got to have, like, if that was your first argument, like, you don't know what the base level is. But if you're normally here and then you express to them, I'm about to say something up here, please hear me out because I'm normally not like this. You know, where there's some sort of situation that you can place everything in to make sense of it. And you know, it's like in Chronicles of Narnia when they're accusing, was it Lucy of lying? And they go to the professor and they're like, she's saying all this crazy stuff happened. And they said, well, or the professor says, does she normally lie? And they're like, no, she normally tells the truth all the time. She never lies. Like, why would you think she's lying now? You know, there's this relationship that the professor brings back into it. So yeah, I mean, that's obviously kind of what we're doing is sort of building an environment in order so that we can say the crazy thing that needs to be talked about. That normally you can't say, or you can't bring up, or you can't have a conversation about. Michael, what's up?
Well, you know, just kind of jumped in. I've been listening for, I don't know, half an hour or something. So, so I don't know what, like, the first thing that got us onto the conversation about conversations, but I know that's a perennial favorite here in the corner. So.
Yeah, T-Grog had taken over Paul's channel, or taken over as the subject of Paul's channel yesterday.
He was in this chat when Luke was going.
I think he's back. T-Grog, are you here?
Yeah. I think he came back too.
And then, like,
Michael, are you feeling better? Michael was feeling sick last week, or took a day off.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, you know, I have a little, you know, I got a little cough that I'm sure will linger for a while, but it's not enough of an excuse to not be a productive member of society. So, yeah. I had a little exchange with T-Grog. He was saying that, you know, like, my faith isn't real because I'm not witnessing miracles all the time or something. and like handling snakes, and then I found out, okay, well, I just sent him the link to my book, and I said, here, if you can read this book, and then you can critique that. So that's the good. It should give him a little something to chew on. So that's one good reason to write a book, I guess.
I can't say enough nice things about you, Michael. Like, I honestly think you're one of the most legit people I've met. I big fan of you as a human being. But a lot of it is just like, is actually part of your decision not to be in ministry. I don't think you're trying to prove anything, like, as a result of that. I don't think you're like trying to sell me so that I start supporting your church. I don't think you're doing that at all. I think you are someone who's a part of, like, you're trying to live out your faith and trying to be a good parent to your daughters and a good husband to your wife. And that you sometimes will get at things that to me are all about real Christian character, where it gets in deep, even at little tiny things that other people might think is stupid. So deal with that problem.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, so I'm still in ministry. I mean, I am part-time. That is part of my job, something I get paid for a little bit. It's not my primary income. But, and I kind of went on this journey from like when I was leaving high school and went to study the ministry, because I was like, well, that's the most important thing. And I still do think it's the most important thing. I just realized that like church has become such a siloed thing, so disconnected from the other aspects of people's life. And it's just funny because like when T. Grog, like anybody that points to the multiplicity of Christian traditions, like that just proves to me that like it's a natural part of human like community. I don't know, like because what I've discovered is that like, yeah, I was in my little first bubble, like of my parents' church, and then I met kids that went to a different church without different beliefs, and then it was like, well, we obviously both love Jesus, but we have these different opinions about things. But the fact that like real relationality was there just meant, I guess we're, at some point you just it just leads to that kind of whole meta discussion where there is not need to be like one true like denomination or tradition. Like there's a value in all of them, and there's a reason why they all come out into their different forms, and there's a function to those different forms. And some of it's bad. Like I think a lot of like theological positions, this is something Alex was talking about before, when he's talking about like boundaries. Like a lot of times, like when it comes to confessions and things like that, people want to make a confession or a creed that puts a boundary on like what people are more or less allowed to think about something for the sake of like managing their behavior. And that is beneficial for some people and detrimental for others. But like, it, and some of those things are probably wrong, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense that they're there. So yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I'm just working while we're talking.
Okay.
Me too. We're all working. Tayo wants to go back to patience, how we all have questions we get stuck on that only God can answer. Michael, have you had that experience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, okay, so like the weird experience that happened recently to me was like, this thing about like, I have autism or whatever, and that finding that out answered like a million unanswered questions that I had throughout my life about
what did
finding out I was like on the spectrum, like the autism spectrum. Because then it was like, oh, okay, so there's actually something different about me and the way that I perceive reality and how I interact with others. But like, I didn't find that out until I was like 39 years old. And so I just had a whole bunch of like, why do I always screw up relationships? Why do people always like never seem to understand what I'm trying to say? Like, and all these things. And all those questions were unanswered until, you know, it was like the Lord's timing. And then, you know, it's interesting how it transforms those past experiences. You know, I kind of think it's like, I know it's like the Job story kind of goes with it, but I also really like the example of Joseph, you know, and I think that it's like once Joseph goes through all of his stuff and he's in the position to save all the people in Egypt, he's going to reassess the way he looks at all his trials and tribulations. And that's why he's able to forgive his brothers, because he sees that, like, if it wasn't for the awful things my brother had done, you know, a lot more people would have died, and a lot of other more really horrible things would have happened to, you know, whole nations and things. So
that's interesting too, because the brothers who partook of the same story don't know that Joseph sees it that way.
Right.
They are terrified that Joseph is going to take correct retribution towards them. So his forgiveness of them is a surprise to them.
Yeah, and that's the one where it's interesting because it just says like generic brothers. I think it doesn't say which ones, but I think, you know, what Joseph notices earlier he sees that same thing that's taken place in Judah, because Judah goes through the whole thing with Tamar, and then he's a changed man, and then he's willing to take Benjamin's place, and that's like the catalyst for Joseph revealing his identity. But, you know, amongst the other brothers, they have not necessarily had such a sobering experience.
Jess, can I ask your opinion on something Job related?
Yes.
Back. There's it's a bless God and die. You know about the bless God and die bit?
Yeah.
That the Hebrew literally says bless God and die.
Yeah.
But it is to be understood that he says curse God and die.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's all throughout chapter 1 and 2. It's in the accusation that Satan makes against Job, where he says to God, Satan says to God, if you strike him, he will bless you to your face. And then also again later on it says the same thing. So anytime you see the word curse in chapter 1 and 2, it's all bless, the actual word. And so basically it gets translated as a euphemism. You like, it's you know, when you say oh, you're really, this doesn't work anymore, the word isn't using it, but you're really bad, like when you actually mean someone's cool and good.
Or no,
you know,
there's one in the States which is, oh, bless your heart. Oh, bless your heart. It means what an idiot you are.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, bless your heart.
But there is something, I was just reading like an academic paper on this, and they were considering I think you can consider it both ways. So she's saying curse God and die, something like, you know, make it known to the world that God has let you down and you're cursing him. So, all right, fine. But then the other side of it is bless God and die. Like, sing his praises and kill yourself. And that's that for me is like even darker, where she says, say your blessings to him, bless him and die. And so there's, I think both are in there. And even in the accusation that Satan brings, this idea that, like, how would it be an accusation to say, if you took away his stuff, Job will bless you? And it could be something like, even if you did evil, Job wouldn't tell you. Like, this is the accusation that Job is corrupt and dishonest because he wants stuff. And so even if you took the stuff away, he'll bless you because he's thinking that you're going to give him something in return.
I've wondered about that too, because when he says the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, we know from the text that it was actually Satan who took away. So he is in that response giving God credit for what Satan did.
Well, God takes credit for it in the chapter 2, because the second time Satan appears, God says, "Have you considered my servant Job? And you enticed me against him to destroy him without reason." And so God says that he's destroyed Job without reason. And so there, you know, if a king has subjects and the king sends someone out and says, do what you think should be done in the situation, and the guy does it, the king isn't, you know, the good proper king isn't like, it wasn't me, it was this guy over here. Like, God sort of takes full responsibility for it, even though it's, you know, Satan is different in the book of Job a little bit, because the name's, it's not a name, Satan. Satan is a title, meaning the accuser, which is actually a role that someone may have in their kingdom, of someone that would bring up problems to the king, because the king has a, you know, if everyone's saying, oh, everything's good in my area, when it's actually not, the king would appoint someone specifically to bring problems to him, so that he would know what's going wrong and not everyone just telling him what he wants to hear. So
a friend of mine was talking to me about how God would have to be guilty for everything human beings did because he created us. And so it's unfair if human beings get punished, because really it should be God who takes the punishment. And I just looked at him and said, you know, I'm a Christian, right? like I just agree. I agree with everything you just said.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
Well,
fact, God seems to say, yes, correct.
Yeah, in Carl Jung's book on the book of Job says, he's talking about Christ in that book, but he says that basically God is paying, or he's paying for his sins, and that he needs our forgiveness for what he's done to us.
What do you think of Chesterton's idea that God shows up and says, I don't even know how all this stuff works? Do you think I think that's a bad description? How do you do you think that there's anything to that?
Zizek kind of, when Zizek talks about Chesterton, he frames it like that, which I think is hilarious. He's like, you know, Zizek says that, you know, Job's complaining, none of this makes sense. Why is this happening to me? And then God shows up and he says, what happened to you doesn't make sense. Like, look at the whole universe. None of it makes sense. It's all a big catastrophe.
Yeah, well, and so that is, I'm glad that you actually knew that where I was getting that from, because I didn't read that from Chesterton. I read that from, or listened
Chesterton
to...
Chesterton doesn't say that specifically. Okay. Chesterton says something like that God comes to the person asking questions and doesn't discourage them from that, but encourages them to ask bigger and bigger questions until finally they question their doubt, or they question themselves. He says by some miracle, he overwhelms the questioner with more questions until they question themselves, or something like that.
That's good. That's very good.
Yeah, no, but Chesterton on Job is awesome. He has a little essay on Job, and that's just worth reading, because he talks about the Old Testament God in there, and how he's like the primary subject for him of the Old Testament is the loneliness of God. He's like, there, in the Old Testament, there seems to be only one character. There's only God. Everything else seems sort of like mechanical and automated and stuff. And the only one that sort of has any depth to him is God himself. And so God has this problem of loneliness, which is trying to get figured out.
Thank you. Really, thank you for clearing that up, because I heard the Chesterton bit from Zizek, possibly the same thing you're referencing. And it's when he's trying to say that, like, because he identifies as a Christian atheist, where he's like, you need God to actually say God doesn't exist. So he uses that Chesterton quote, but then also, what's it called? Jesus on the cross. He's like, that's the most important thing, that God becomes an atheist.
Yeah.
Like,
well, he's like, atheism only comes out of Christianity, and he sees the root of it. He's like, right. Christ on the cross makes way for atheism possible. Atheism to be possible.
It's kind of funny, but it has a really good point, I think.
Yeah, you don't see atheists springing up out of other. It's only after secularism gets spread. This is Tom Holland's whole point. I mean, secularism spreads, and then that's what creates atheists, and then that's also the fruit of Christianity.
Okay, I don't know where we're at.
Yeah, I think, like, if you think about, like, this thought about God, like, becoming an atheist or whatever, what you have, like, in the incarnation is beyond that, because it's like God willingly giving up the thing that it's something beyond what we, like, believe in, but something that he knows and understands, in the surrender of that godness, like, it goes beyond, like, not believing in God. He gives up being God, essentially.
Yeah. Jason,
I want to talk about God not knowing everything.
You want to talk about God not knowing everything?
Yeah, because isn't that what you said, David? Because I think
I love when God does little bits like that. So
I don't think he does. That's what okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from the prophetic literature is God says, "Not only did I not ask you to sacrifice your children, it didn't even occur to me that I could ask you to do that." Right? That's God's. He's like surprised that, right?
Well, anybody that's ever written anything at all understands this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if you've ever been a creative writer, you understand that most of what you write, most of what I've written has not existed prior to it reaching the page. So like I'll have vague idea based on my own experience, and then I start telling the story, and then all of a sudden the story starts to take shape of its own. And
yeah, because you allow things to exist. Like it gives space for imagination, and you're not like locking things in a box. That's why I was saying in the comment.
How great would that be, right?
To lock everything in a box, have everything.
No, I mean, like that like God is like experiencing the story unfold as we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I think. Because that's how it happens with your children. Like when it says God knows the beginning from the end, it doesn't say he knows every little detail about every little tiny thing. It's like he loves in the beginning and he loves at the end. You only need to know one simple thing, and then you can know everything. And that's how it is with your kids. It's like, I'm going to love them in the beginning, I'm going to love them in the end, so therefore I know them. I know them fully. Like everything they do, it almost is, it's not irrelevant, but it kind of is, because they're encompassed in this love that is, like, that's why I say God is all-knowing, just for the simple fact that he loves. Like, he doesn't have to know everything. That's why there's all that mystery still. It allows for mystery, like the stories you're talking about, like your child's life. It's like you watch it unfold, but you still have them in your hand, because you have them. You do and you don't. You're not like crushing them like with that, but it's like nothing can take them from your palm, because it's not like a class. It's like, they're just resting there in your love. or something.
I think this might be related, Jason. I had this experience where I was in church and they were talking about this early section of Mark where Jesus is in his hometown and he could do very few works because of their unbelief. And then he goes and casts out a bunch of demons. And I was thinking about it myself where I was like, oh, this is interesting. The demons are not a problem. They are no trouble whatsoever. People are a problem. If there's a demon that's responsible for someone being deaf, Jesus can cast it out like that. But if it's because of the human beings, then he has the problem.
Well,
and then he's amazed. He's amazed at their unbelief.
I think this is why the demons fall, is because they accuse God of doing something wrong by creating man and putting so much trust in him. The fundamental accusation, when Satan accuses Job, he's not just accusing Job, he's accusing mankind as a whole. Because the best man, he's accusing, there's this internal corruption there. You should have never created them. This is a giant mess. What are you doing, God? It's a judgment of God for his foolishness. And God's back to the surprise, the God knowing things. This is a point I love from not Chesterton. I got Chesterton in my head. George MacDonald, where he says, I believe that God is surprised continuously. He's always surprised, like just constantly surprised and delighted.
I was thinking about, we have these things that we say about the problem of pain, like what kind of God would create a world where, the suffering and blah, 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 all the different suffering. It's like the same kind of God that would actually allow you to have life. If you really think about that, like the fact that, yes, many have suffered, like unspeakable. There are some unspeakable things I can think about that are really, really horrible. And yet, there's this really terrible story about this baby whose mother left the child in the crib to go spend time with a boyfriend for the weekend. And just you can imagine the horrible things that happen with this child, an infant. And it's so horrible. And yet that something about the child having the miracle of life, even though it was very short and very horrible in the very end, it's still a miracle,
Yeah, well, I think it gets to, like, what we have here is a real world. It's like, even when people frame things like, we're just in the mind of God, or we're within the imagination of God, and I guess in some way that's true, but in another way, we were made real. Like we have being that was gifted to us from God, and we don't support ourselves, so there's some way which God sustains everything too, but also we have a reality about us that is actually real, so that we could do something that maybe God wouldn't expect, or when Jesus is amazed at someone's faith, like those are the kind of things that he sees come from someone has some ounce of faith, and he's amazed by it because he's not pulling the strings, he's not doing that came from the person, and so there's a reality to what we're not in a simulation, we're not a part of a multiverse. Like God really sort of placed his bets on a reality and not a fiction.
And that gal that touched his robe, that story always floors me too, because it has to do not just with merely just with God, but it's her faith, and she didn't even have to touch him, but his robe. Hey, I gotta get going, guys.
All right, see you, Chad. Mitch, how's it going, man?
Hey, brother. I think the main thing that I wanted to say, and I have this terrible habit now of saying things like the way I say them. But the thing that I wanted to say is that God knows everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that.
I
I'm saying
agree.
he knows one thing and he knows everything. I'm just saying it's not in the way that I normally frame it.
Mitch, we
It's the
actually
same thing
had
with
this conversation earlier where we said the importance of saying something regardless of whether or not you're saying it correctly. You're
Right.
like, I do think that's deeply important. It's good.
It was very
Thank you
succinct too, and right to the point. I love it.
Yes. No caveats.
Well,
God
I
knows
think
everything.
about that thing. The cost of like creating this world and God and how like human suffering is not something separate from God, but like that it's something He does experience in some way. Because I think about like the way you create things. Because I think if you say like, what is the world that God wanted to create? We have a vision of the world that He ultimately wanted to create, like in Revelation, this new heavens and the new earth. But, when you make something, you can have like the vision of the thing you want to make, but then you have to more or less figure out how do you get there. And, it's like the same thing with, it's like, okay, it gives the vision to Moses of like the tabernacle, or the vision of the ark to Noah. Like they see the goal, but they are kind of like in the dark while they're taking all the steps to get there. But then once they get there, all of that like work then is like real, and it's like fixed and eternal. And so I think that like because there is like a future that God truly desired, which is one where we like see Him face to face, He's allowing us to go through this painful process of living life in the way that we experience it now. And so in some sense, like future God, which that's the whole thing with like time, like God invents time, so how do you like deal with that? But it's like, yes, future God knows everything and sees everything and has all the answers. Sometimes He will like grab a little bit of that future and like inject it into our timeline to like keep us going, and He gives us that little like foretaste of the ultimate. But like it's but he also like entered into this suffering process in a personal way through the like incarnation. And so I think that that's yeah, it's one of those complicated things, but it gets to the point where you can't ultimately like think like how dare God inflict suffering on humans. Like trust me, it's more pain. Humanity's existence is more painful for Him than it is for us.
Well, I'm wondering this, and I was thinking about it related to what you were saying, Jess, about how by condemning humanity, Satan is actually condemning God. And relating this to being in the image of God. Depending on how you understand that notion of being the image of God, I don't want to go all new agey and weird like that, but like to what extent are we not? And again, we're just in God's imagination and all this other stuff like that people just say very flippantly. But in the ancient world, you could call the spirit of a god into an image. And then when you did things to that image, it was like doing it to the god. So to what extent is God actually suffering in our suffering? Because that is how we are alive, as His image.
Yeah, this touches on something I've been dealing with a lot, and I've been wrestling on whether or not I have an Antichrist spirit or a demon or something. But it's like getting increasingly unclear to me, the division between God and man. Like I can't see a difference. Even in consciousness. Like so you want to say God is some like great consciousness out there. I'm like, how's that different from humanity's total consciousness, collective consciousness thing? Like, I just can't even see the distinction anymore. And then when you judge a person, you're ultimately judging God. Ultimately, like if you follow that thread or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's a verse. That's a verse in the New Testament. You bless God, but you curse a man.
Yeah. Well, the reason
you curse
I feel
man
like
who's the closest, who's made in his image.
Yeah, that's true. The reason I feel like I don't know that I'm the reason I feel like I'm in error is because I have so much pushback where it's just like you can't do that. Even talking to priests and stuff, I will try to press the question like, so do you forgive my sins or does God? And I'm like, if you're just gonna say God does, that doesn't matter to me. Like if I'm being totally honest to you, like it matters to me in some sense, but then what am I doing at the end of the day? I'm just sitting with a ghost. Like I want an incarnate person to forgive my sins. And I think that's the importance of Christ. But then at the same time, I'm like, where I'm at in history right now, he's just a story. Like he hasn't showed it like, but then that's what I mean. I've been wrestling with this thing with Thomas, and it's like, am I wrong because I want to like put my hand in his side? Like I need to feel the his hands. Like I need the flesh and bone of him, that measure of forgiveness, of that measure of love. Like I want to see it incarnate.
That's
And
beautiful.
can I not
I
just
love it.
can I but it's like, can I not just be pleased knowing that exists, even if I never see it in this life, even if I never like, can I just believe?
Yeah.
And it's like there is a contentment in that, but there's still this like yearning I just can't get rid of. But it is like it weirdly takes everything and just blends it to where God is man. And I'm just like, and it just, it's put me in this weird place where I'm like, I don't know if this is right or not, but I still haven't been able to shake it. Andrew looks ripped.
I
What's going on?
love the filmmaking decisions that Andrew chose for pouring the Fruit Loops and the milk.
Drinking milk.
Yeah.
A little cereal tutorial.
Yeah. Jason, quite seriously, I loved that. I loved everything you said. I might return to this and steal every word you said and put it into a play. I liked it that much.
Okay.
Yeah. This was
it's been
Jason,
a struggle lately, but
has there ever been a time where the distinction was very clear to you, and what do you think changed?
the times where I feel like it's clear are weirdly kind of times of despair or something, where it's like, man, like those moments like we talked about, Mitch, where you throw out this truth about yourself, and kind of it just lingers out there and you're waiting on that love to meet you or something. And it's like, okay, so I just confessed this thing to this person. Now I gotta wait to see if they'll forgive me. And it's like, okay, if they don't, I mean, I guess God still does, and Jesus still does too, and I can still not only try to hinge my hope on that or faith on that. It's just like there is nothing else. So it's like even if that's the case and that's all there is, it's like that's all I can hope for. So that's what I have to believe in and have to try to be in this world. I have to try to be like God and be like Christ. So, but there's still this weird kind of despair of like, God, I hope this person forgives me. Like I hope this person that's here now face to face with me, I hope they can forgive me. And so it's like, you know what I mean?
I think so. I mean, we do think of, Christ's church being his body, and in that sense, bringing him incarnationally into the world, and to that measure, the forgiveness of someone else in that body is I mean, it's huge. But it's only ever, it's never autonomous. It's always deputized by the head, which is Christ. And so in that sense, they're not just, I mean, there's a sense in which they're not distinguishable, but the greater sense, more often it seems like we have to talk about it in distinction. But there is a sense in which there's a harmony there, where he as the head, directs. I mean, you could say the hand's doing it when I do something, but usually you say Mitch is doing it. That makes the most sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. There was, on the, I mean, hopefully I can share this. I'm not going to share any details, but like when you said that our mutual friend Michael Robb told you, like, he said the words, "I forgive you," and God forgives you. And, I like that. And then just sitting there thinking about that, because like I mentioned to you, we sometimes hear people say, like, well, God forgives you, but I don't, and it's like that, people have thrown that phrase out. But then, like, flipping that, like, I'm just like, I haven't really saw it with that too. Like, what if you had a friend say, well, I forgive you, but God doesn't? Like, where does that put you? And where does that put your friend? I'm like, I don't really know. I almost like wrestling with that question a little bit too, because it's just I think that begs the question, can we love more than God? Like, if I were to say to someone, well, I forgive you, but God probably doesn't, like, then it's like, well, am I really more forgiving than God? And then it puts you in this weird middleman mediator place, and then you're just like, I don't know. It's just
that's a hypothetical that's pretty difficult to entertain. I mean,
yeah,
it sounds like in this scenario that the person is truly repentant, and the Lord, a contrite heart to Him is everything. That's the most pure sacrifice. So I mean, it's that's a tough hypothetical to entertain.
Yeah, it is, and it's just a hypothetical, but it's yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, I guess just thinking about that, I probably need to think about it more and wrestle with it more. But it reminded me of that verse in Ezekiel where God says, I sought for a man to stand between me and the city so that I wouldn't destroy it, and I found no one.
What's that song that you recently did? Is it Perfect Riddance, where it talks about, like,
Yeah.
I'm too selfish to get on the cross for someone else. Like, there is
Selfish
always
to die
this
for my
spottedness to us that prevents us from taking on that place that in our best moments we would like to take on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the line is, "I'm too selfish to die for my own damn self," or something like that.
It's such a good song too. But the distinction being that, I mean, we can't accomplish the pure sacrifice that sometimes we'd even like to be, and that's a good thing to want, to be able to intercede. And there are small ways which we can seriously do that, or we could take off this very temporal burdens of other people, and in that way we act as little Christs. But in the ultimate pardon, we're powerless to be that intercessor.
Do you find there's more in that line of thinking, like the powerlessness? Do you find there's despair in that, or more hope? Because to me, I just feel like, it's kind of gets at one of those things where God says, "Be perfect," or Jesus says, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." And I've heard people say, well, obviously you can't do that because no one can be perfect. And I feel like God's not really pulling your leg. Like, there actually is something you could actually be one with Him. But are you saying, like, you kind of can't? Like,
I think you can be perfect is insofar as, like, that's the direction you're moving in. Like, I choose today to be perfect, but obviously I know what's behind me, and I know that's still me. And I don't like to say I know what's ahead of me. I think that's sort of a poor way of thinking. Like, oh, I know I'm going to sin again. I mean, that's you could think of that as, there's a certain humility to that, but there's also a certain, like, I'm disregarding this be perfect mandate when you think along those lines. I think we should be perfect. I think we could be perfect, but we're not perfect. Be perfect now. You're not perfect.
It's quiet. It's too quiet. What's up, Andrew?
I mean, what was it?
Go for it, Jess.
Like, for me, the perfect stuff, I think we have to think of it in terms of a good father and his children. When a good father says to his kids, "Be perfect like me," he means something other than Well, that's how I picture God saying it to us. There is so often we think there's like some sort of platonic ideal that we're always missing the mark on. We're always sinning. We're always doing this and that. And I guess there's some truth to that. But also, like, sin is not a problem for God. Sin is something that God has accounted for and made a way to be freed from. Sin is like our problem, and so when God says be perfect like me, and then he asks us to forgive each other, I think that's coming a little more close to what it means to be perfect than trying to behave, and there's a way in which strict obedience and behavior is not what God wants either. He wants, if your child wakes up in the morning and stands straight and just does whatever you say and doesn't do anything else, you're like, you're not being who you are. You're not being a child. Go play, go do something. I would rather you break something than stand like a robot beside me. You're freaking me out. And
yeah.
so
yeah. No, go ahead.
No, that's all. I was
just gonna say that reminds me of The Sandlot. I love that movie where he's like that, in the beginning, and he's like playing with all his Tinker toys, and she's like, "You need to go get in trouble. Like, go kid."
Yeah, I have one son who's a little more prone to trouble, and I have another son who's prone to. He stays so far away from trouble. I'm like, I would be happy if you broke a window, like. I would flunk a class, like do something. And then my other son, I'm having to encourage the other way. I'll be like, pay attention. Like, don't just do whatever you want. Like, so like, it depends on who you
There's
are.
so much to do, though. There's so much to do that's not breaking windows, that is adventurous and risky. God has given us no shortage of things that we can go and be about. His business, the things that are good.
I understand what you're saying.
For sure,
yeah.
but my cautious son, like, he avoids all that good because he's afraid he's going to break a window.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that type of person. They're afraid so much of their own limitedness and their own sinfulness, and then, like, if they try something and it's not perfect, then that's their sin interfering. And it's better not to try anything at all. Like, there's those type of people, and I'm kind of more that way. And so, like, I always am encouraged by a message of, it doesn't matter if you break the window, we'll get it fixed, whatever. Just go do something. Like, something is better than just standing there paralyzed,
Yeah, I think this gets at stuff. Yeah. Well, I think this gets at with the heart of what you were saying, and too, Jess. And I mean, I was kind of smiling earlier because I was just like, that's what I'd say over and over, that my theology is based around forgiveness. But I'm just like that when you realize there's that blanket there, that unconditional love, then it's kind of like those things. It's not that you want them to harm someone else's property or do something wrong. It's just like there's an allowance for things to exist, and the forgiveness is what makes perfect. Like, that makes things perfect. Like, when you see, like, the bride in the New Testament who's like presented before God without spot and without blemish, is like, well, how could any of that be? Like, how can he take this whore of a church and present her spotless before him? And it's like, it's just forgiveness. Like, you experience that with your kids. Like, you could still call your kids perfect. Someone else might not, but if you really love them, it's like, yeah, they're still perfect. They messed up a ton, but they're still perfect. So I don't know. That's just, I think when it's framed around forgiveness, that's why I think, that's why it always stood out to me. That's when I think that was one of the first times I really started to question it too. Just how I thought of the word perfection was because if you read Matthew, he says be perfect. But then if you read Luke, he says be merciful. And it's the same thing. And I'm just like, and that's what I mean. Like, go on that rabbit hole, looking at the mercy seat and everything else.
Your kid's only perfect if they're perfect, right? Like, if they're being perfect. Like, again, not to say that they're doing everything exactly right, but that they are participating at some level in repentance and in mercy, that they're making an effort towards goodness.
That's a good point.
They have to be perfect, actually.
I mean, I think that's a good point. And I feel like there's a way, like, okay, because me saying it's all blanketed in this unconditional love is kind of a way of, I think, kind of sidestepping and stepping out of the particular, like the moments in time when like someone actually is like murdering someone else or being disobedient or being not perfect, than when they are perfect. Like your point, Mitch, just reminded me of, forgive or you won't be forgiven. It's like, there is, when you're in that, when you're operating in that, being merciful to others and being perfect and blameless to others, that's when you are blameless, because you're really, really like not casting blame or something. Or it's like, it seems always like hand in hand.
And to a point that you make often, being merciful is not overlooking the truth of the matter. And so there could be a sense of blame casting, but that blame casting is just as sometimes mercy can be getting on the cross for another person, judgment can be getting on the cross for another person, because you're having to make the risk of offering a judgment.
That's scary.
Truly scary. That is, sometimes mercy can be burying your talent in the ground and not breaking a window, because sometimes you have to risk the making a judgment, knowing that you're not perfect and it's going to come back on your own head. But it's out of love for the other person.
Yeah, I want to hear if you said out more. Or sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Or in the parable of the talents, when the guy buries the talent, like why does he bury the talent?
Yeah, his master is a hard master, and he's worried that if he loses it or loses what he invested in him, that
and so there's a fundamental he doesn't understand his master, and he doesn't understand that what his master has given him will always give a return, and so there's this sort of like, and it's also the mistake the older brother makes in the parable of the prodigal son. The older brother is like, you never even gave me a goat for me to celebrate with my friends. And the father's like, you never asked. You never asked me. Everything I have is yours, and you never even asked. And it just shows that like we have this image of God that is unlike how he really is. And usually we're either too hard on ourselves. I mean, both the older brother and the prodigal son don't understand the father. But through the prodigal son's foolishness, the father has an opportunity to show himself for who he is. Whereas the older brother, he didn't have that opportunity to show himself. And so we see God, who he is, through the foolishness of the prodigal son, because he gets this opportunity to like be extravagant and kill the fatted calf and throw this party. That's the father's heart. The older brother doesn't, and he's mad about this. He's like, what is going on? How is my father screwed things up again by being completely irresponsible? Here I am trying to hold things down, and my father is doing irresponsible things. I got to get going here in a few minutes. I'm going to shut her down too.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Does anyone have any closing thoughts? Andrew, do you want to say anything? Just eat the cereal and be present.
What cereal are you eating? I'm so curious.
Fruit Loops.
Fruit Loops. What? Do you like Fruity Pebbles?
Never had them.
Oh man, eat those. You'll put away Fruit Loops forever.
Enjoy talking to you guys.
Good talking to you too, Mitch. Good to see you.
See ya.
Amen.
All right, Jason. Closing thoughts. You get the floor.
I don't have anything else. Yeah, sorry. That's
it. What?
I said I don't have anything else. Sorry. That's it.
All right, we'll end on that. Gentlemen, it's good to see you.
See ya.
Stream is ending.